GEBE and the fuel clause. What is this all about, really? Do you know what you're paying for? Do you understand how it's calculated? Simply put, the formula should be the amount paid for the fuel divided by the amount of produced kilowatt hours. So you should take your total electricity, which is approximately 310 million kilowatt hours per year. Then you should divide that by the total that is paid for fuel. Now, the fuel numbers, or the price that is paid by GEBE for the fuel numbers, is not always clear. As the fuel varies, so does the cost. That is how it should have been. The amount produced, 310 million kilowatt hours, the total fuel bill for the year, and we divide that and we have an average. Now, GEBE does it on a monthly basis. So every month they produce an X amount of kilowatt hours, they pay for an X amount of fuel, they divide the two, and you have your fuel clause. But that's not what happens. What GEBE does is GEBE takes the total produced and then they subtract three things. They subtract the kilowatt hours used for water production in St. Martin, which is approximately 23.5 million kilowatt hours a year, or approximately 7.6% of the total production. Then the power plant has its internal usage of approximately 9 million kilowatt hours per year, or 2.9%. And then you have distribution losses on the net for another 18.6 million, or give and take 6% of your total production. Now, when you add up these three losses, you suddenly reach to approximately 51.1 million kilowatt hours per year, or about 16.5%. So, if you now take the 310 million and you subtract those three, you now suddenly reach to 258.9 million kilowatt hours per year, or approximately 83.5%. Now, this is where things go wrong. And why do I say that? We are changing the build-up of the fuel clause, because most of the things that I just mentioned there have a place in a different category. The losses on your net belong to your operational loss. The power plant usage belongs to your operational production. And the deductions for the water production company, they have no place at all being taken off of the total production. Now, there are reasons why they do some of these things, but it is still not correct. Let's understand something. The losses of electricity on the net and the usage of electricity by GEBE in the power plant is part and parcel the 0.25% that you pay right now per kilowatt hour. That's where that loss should have been placed. And if the 0.25 cents is not correct, then let's adjust that accordingly. Because you shouldn't punish everybody for usages and losses that are not relevant to the fuel. Now, the contract that the government signed with the water production plant states you cannot charge them for the fuel clause, because then the water production price will remain stable. They pay for electricity, they pay 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So they do pay for their electricity, but they do not pay for the fuel clause, making the fuel clause price, because of all three deductions, a much higher fuel clause than we should be paying. Now, I have prepared two tables. The first table, I have used the fuel clauses on the bills from January, February, from March, from April, and from May. And I put that on the net sales that we had before of 258,900,000 guilders. Now, remember, this was the net for the year. So by doing this, I am just trying to get to a cost analysis of what the fuel would have costed. So you will see 69 million, you'll see 82 million, you'll see 90 million, and you'll see 98 million. Remember, these are yearly costs if the fuel clause was at that number. But you have 12 months, so if you take the 69 million, you have to divide it by 12 to get the average for that month. Again, the numbers are not 100%, but it is just to give you an idea of what's happening. If you now go and do the calculation using the complete year price and using the fuel cost that we had, you will realize that the red numbers should have been the actual fuel clause rate. So in January, February, we should have been paying 22.5 cents and not 27 cents. In March, we should have been paying 26.7 cents instead of 32 cents. In April, we should have been paying 29.2 cents instead of 35 cents. And in May, we should have paid 31.7 cents instead of 38 cents. The higher the fuel clause gets, the bigger the margin becomes in what we should be paying versus what they are charging us. Now, why I did this is to show you the fictitious run that we are having here in GEBE. And again, GEBE needs to come out and explain where they got the right to charge this fuel clause, because the articles in their concession don't state this. And if they have a separate resolution for such, maybe it's time to come out and tell the people exactly why this is. Now, there are a bunch of questions. When you view the tables that I just showed, that will come out. And I'm not going to read every one of them, but I must read question number 9 very, very specifically. It says, can the cost breakdown of the 25 cents be made public so we can see what that cost is built up of? In accordance with Article 12, Sub 4 of the Electricity Concession, the tariffs that GEBE may charge are regulated by national decree of a general measure. There's an LBHUM, they call those. The tariff is built up of investments and operational activities. They don't even mention fuel clause in there. As they saw that the operating of an engine and the distribution of electricity is an operational activity. So again, you cannot take the losses and your personal usage in the plant and make that part of the fuel clause. The law, the concession doesn't allow it. But it goes further, because we need to also understand why they add the lubricants into the fuel clause price. Because when they say fuel cost, it's not only the diesel and the bunker C. No, they put in all the oils they use in the engine, whatever they have down there, and they make that part and parcel of the fuel clause. But the lubricants are a part of the daily operations, because you don't put oil every day. You put oil as you go along, but it is part of your operations, so it should remain there. They are doing as if the lubricants are changing in price like fuel does, and that is not true. Because they buy 500 drums of oil, and that oil goes for the whole year or for half the year. In that half a year, the fuel might have variated 3-4 times, not the lubricant. So again, there are some very deceiving things in here. What we are paying is too high because of all the subtractions of the usages, losses, and water production. Because of that, we are paying more for fuel clause than we should actually be paying. And GEBE, and by extension the government who looks on and sees this happening, should know better and should do better.